You ever get into one of those small jobs that is supposed to be a 10-minute thing and it just snowballs into something way bigger? Yep. Welcome to Cody's Corner Garage. So basically what we got going on here is I've been having trouble for a little while. This thing's had a little bit of a tick going on. I thought it was an exhaust leak, and it wasn't. So I thought, well, maybe one of the rocker arms is backing off a little bit. You know, you're not supposed to reuse the nuts that hold those down, but I did. So I gave them all a little snug and, checked them all, did what you're supposed to do, turn it around, check them, turn it some more, check them, if you've been around this stuff before, you know the drill. So I got those adjusted. Ran it again, it was still ticking, so okay. Pull the valve covers back off. And I did what you're not supposed to do, and I ran it with the valve covers off. It makes a little bit of a mess, it's fine. It's not the first time there's been oil on the floor in here, or the headers. And what happened was you could see one of the valves not opening as much as all the other exhaust valves. And while it was running, I turned that nut in and out, and you could tell that it wasn't really making any difference. So I think what's going on, I'm hoping what's going on, is it's got a bad lifter. And if it's not a bad lifter, then we're putting a cam in this engine, because that's the only other thing that it could be. So, I'll get you in here and show you where we're at so far. So, as you can see, got all these adjusted properly. So there's no lash, but I can still turn them. So, the one that's given us issues is this one right here. And you can see I've already had it out, actually, because I wanted to check and make sure that the push rod wasn't just chewed up on one end and making it too short. So, what we're going to have to do is pull that, take the push rod out. Actually, before we get into any of that, we got to pull the intake off, but then pull that off and pull the push rod out and pull the lifter out. I'll have a look at the lifter and see if it's smoked. So now, I don't have any new parts available. There's nothing in any of the shops around here, but I do have this Parts 350. And it's a TBI engine, but I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. If you ever go looking for lifters, GM used the same flat tappet hydraulic lifter from the beginning of the dinosaurs all the way up until 1995. So, basically any small block Chevy up to a Vortec has the same lifter. It's HL66, and that is everyone that I've ever come across. Someone out there is probably going to correct me in the comments, but I would say 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to have that lifter. So, we're going to have at least one good usable lifter in this engine, I'm assuming. So we'll just pull them out, pick the best one, plop it in that engine, see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, we need a cam. Alright, so that's where we're at. So, do I want to tear into the truck engine, or do I want to take a lifter out of this first? Alright, so normally you don't have to pull the head off. Let's just get that straight. You don't have to pull the head off to do this, but I am going to be tearing this engine down. I'm probably going to make a video on that itself. So since I'm taking it down anyway, I'm just going to get it out of the way, and it's way easier to get at everything. Here we go. Wonder how many of these are going to snap. what?
Anything horrible?
Not bad.
No.
How? It might not be a bad engine. Oh. Anywho, so what I got here is just a cheapo blind puller.
Oh.
You can buy the proper tool for this. I know that's not in straight.
Oh. Aha. Oh. Oh yeah.
Look at that.
Big guy.
Right out. And that,
Easy.
the end of it is not worn even a little bit. Look at how clean that is.
What happens if they like?
Alright. So, we got a lifter out of that other engine. Next job is to dig into this one. So, we have to pull the distributor, pull the intake. To pull the intake, we have to pull the heater hose, upper rad hose, alternator bracket. A few things we gotta do. Alright, here we go. Commencing mess. Yep, there we go. There we go. Okay. Let's try and get enough of that out of there to where we're not making a huge mess all over the intake. There, get that out of the way. Now, I haven't had any of this apart in a long time. Uh-oh. I really don't want to twist that fuel line off. That looks like that's what it's trying to do right now. Please don't twist off the fuel line. Okay. I think we got it broke loose now. Cutting. Oh no. Oh, that's all in the engine. Hand funnel. Oh, that went right down into the oil passages. Okay, we're doing an oil change now. Add that to the list. Probably should have drained more of the coolant. Well, now that we've made a mess, let's drain the coolant. Let's do that now. Now that it's already a problem. Because that makes sense. You don't want to go back and do stuff the right way until after you've already done it the wrong way, right? Spark plugs are simple for a small block. 1843652. So if you know the order and you can trace back from your cylinder up the wires, then you don't really have to be too particular. You can just pull them all off, and put them back on when you're done. Which is the way that I'm going to do it. How is everything in good shape and still stuck? I don't get it. I only put those on a couple of years ago. Oh, my shoulder just popped. Well, come off of there. Why are you so stuck? Okay, cap can come off. Okay. Oh, I forgot to take that off. I'll get out of there. Ah. What about the button? How's that look? Not the best. Okay, I need to get this clip off of here, which I like to do by hand. That saves it from flying and going down into the oil galleries. So we just got to pull the distributor, pull the bracket for the alternator, and then start taking all of the intake bolts off. Alright, so here we are. Ignore the mess of coolant, that was me. I spilled some. Don't worry, we'll dry this out and change the oil and whatever. Anyway, so this right here, this one, is the lifter that's giving us problems. So that's the one we're going to be taking out. Then we'll just have a look at the rest of them while we're in here, make sure that they're all got their retaining clips where they're supposed to be and all that. But yeah, that's the only one that's giving us trouble, so we'll go to popping that out. But first I'm going to clean up all this coolant. Alright, so we're going to pull out the rocker arm and push rod. There. Out with ye. Okay. Now, this dandy little tool is something I picked up on Amazon. And you absolutely don't need this, but it makes the job a heck of a lot easier for pulling lifters out. Be very careful when you're putting this in. There's a little ball bearing inside of it, inside this piece. Do not drop that into an oil gallery in your engine, or you'll have a very bad day. So the deal with this is it actually fits through the pushrod hole, so you don't have to take your head off. Pull the lifter with the head still on. So that just inserts into the lifter. And as I'm tightening this, it's spreading the fingers out on the end of that tool. That's all it's doing. So now, see, I can turn it. I can turn the lifter. I can see it moving. So then the way this works is it's just a slide hammer. So you just uh-oh. Well now, I have never seen that happen before. So, fast forward a few minutes. I got the lifter out. And I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Check that out. That's pretty bad. Also, never seen that happen before. I even used the proper tool and she just poof. I think it's because this is so mushroomed out that it was not coming out of the bore. You can almost see how tapered it is, actually. Anywho, so that's wrecked. So what I did was I put the good lifter back in it and just rotated the engine over until it was at its max lift, as far as it would go, and this is the result. So this one right here, again, don't mind the coolant mess. This one right here is a good one, and it's on its way back in. It's already like, I don't know, a quarter or an eighth of the way back in to the bore. This is the problem one. That's at its max height right now. It won't go any higher. So that means we have a bad cam. And I'm not putting a cam in a 305. Instead, we're going to rebuild this engine. Now, rebuild, by that I mean just, pull the oil pan, make sure the rotating assembly's still tight and there's no spun bearings or anything like that, anything crazy. Give everything a good flush, not the cylinders, I mean like coolant and oil passages, flush everything out good. Get a different set of heads for it, new cam, new lifters, probably bigger cam, might as well. Aluminum intake, probably rebuild or buy new HEI distributor, drop that in. And then basically we can just pull all of the accessories off of that existing engine, plop them onto this engine, which is a TBI 350, but that doesn't matter because it still has all the same stuff as the old school 350s. So basically, yeah, that's the plan. We're gonna do a freshen up, not really a rebuild, but just freshen this thing up and kind of tweak it a little bit, and then drop it into that. But for now, that engine was still running poorly, but it was running. So I'm probably just going to throw this back together, likely tomorrow. And yeah, we'll just let it hammer away as it is for now. There's only a couple months left of time to drive it anyway, and I'm not really going to drive it much. And then it's going to get parked for the winter anyway. So put it back together. At least then I can move it around the yard without using, this. And then in the meantime, start gathering up some parts and freshening this thing up. And then come springtime, we can take this and plop it into that, and then we'll have a decent little 350. Get a little more spring in its, a little more pep in its, a little more spice in its coffee. That's your sign of a bad cam right there. Is that's basically as simple as it gets. You just compare a couple of them. That one is not even at its max lift. That one is max lift, and I realize, yes, one's an exhaust, one's an intake, but I've compared, this is just an example, I've compared that to this exhaust one, and it's just, the other ones will go twice as far as that. So it's you've seen the lifter, it's worn out, it's done. Cam's no good. And if I'm buying a cam, I'm not putting it in the 305. I'm going to put a cam in the 350 and then put the 350 in the truck. All right, so that'll do it for tonight. So when you buy one of these gasket kits, it comes with little rubber gaskets. Don't use these. They're junk. What you want to do is build up a nice wall of RTV all the way along here. Nice and heavy. What's good to do is let that tack up for a couple minutes before you lay the intake on. And I'm going to get my wife to help me put the intake on it because it's really heavy. Those cast iron intakes are just... I will not be using that on my next engine build, but right now the goal here is just stick this together enough that at least I can move it around until I build my other engine. You want to make sure your manifold's really clean before you put the RTV on the engine. I did that the other day, but I guess I only did one side. So now I'm frantically cleaning to get the other side clean before that RTV cures. Okay.
Excuse me.
These C10 trucks, you can get real intimate with your engine. You just get in here and hang out with it. How you doing, buddy? I know you're feeling a little down. It's okay. You're tired, I get it. If you can run just a little bit longer, just enough I can get you out of the garage and back in one more time. That's all we need out of you, okay? Can you handle that? Okay. Are you ready? All right. Heave. And in. And back this way a little bit. And down. Right there. Goop. 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 Okay. Now, let me just stick a couple bolts in just to line it up. So what I do with this is I put a couple in, not to tighten it up yet. Don't get excited. I just put a couple in just to line it up and make sure that it's centered. So once you got it centered, you got at least 2 bolts in it to line it up. Let it sit here for a minute. Let the RTV just do its thing. And then, after it's sat for a minute or two, start putting some bolts in and tightening them down. Now, the 4 outside bolts on the intake, the 4 corners, do not need any sealant. They're blind holes. However, all the rest of them go into the head. If you pass light through, you can actually see it coming out. Like I can see my finger right there. Which means that if you don't put any kind of sealant in that, you're going to get oil coming up. So, normally, you would take some sort of sealant and put it on the threads of all these bolts. Now, I'm not going to do that because in this case, this engine's only going to run for maybe 15 minutes between now and when I pull it out. It's toast. So, other than moving it around the yard, it's not going to run. I'm not really worried about spilling oil out of the heads. And for all that's going to leak out of it, I'm not going to worry about it. When we build the other engine, you'll see I'll use sealant on the inner holes. But the 4 outside corners, you don't have to do that. Clear? There's one more thing you don't want to forget. You're going to be pulling your engine soon, obviously. So don't forget to put your engine crane hook devices. I mean, unless you want to pull your carburetor and use an intake plate. But I have these, so yeah. All right. That RTV's been doing its thing for a few minutes, so let's start putting her back together, I guess. All right, so we're ready to put our distributor back in. Now, what I've done is I already put the engine on top dead center on compression on number 1. And the way that I did that, there's 2 ways you can do this. Well, there's a bunch of different ways, but the 2 main ways is you're going to spin the crank or hold the belt tight and spin the belt. And you're going to feel when number 1 is coming up on compression, just put your thumb over the spark plug hole and turn it over. If you're having trouble doing that by yourself, the way that I did it is I've already got the valve cover off. I watched the valves to make sure that they were both closed, so I knew I was on the compression stroke. And then I had a cheap video scope here that I got at the hardware store, and I shoved that in the spark plug hole, and you can watch a piston come up. And you just keep going until it stops. And then you're on top dead center. Now, when you're on top dead center on number 1, what you want to do is you drop your distributor in and get it facing a way that your vacuum advance and everything is in a good spot. And you drop that in there with the rotor pointing at the number 1 spark plug. Now, here's the deal. That's curved. So when you drop that in, you actually have to have it a little bit off from that so that when it slides in and drops, it drops and faces the number 1 spark plug. If you don't do that, it's going to be pointing more that way. It doesn't seem like much, but that throws it off by quite a bit. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is the oil drive comes off the bottom. And what you might have to do is use a screwdriver or an old distributor, if you have one, use the shaft out of it, and just turn the oil drive until it wants to line up with this. Alright, so I got the distributor in. It's just sitting there floating loose right now, you see. Still move it. So what we're going to do, the rotor's sitting right at number 1, pointing right at the number 1 cylinder. This is going to be number 1 right here. So it's 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. It just keeps going around and around like that. That's your firing order. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. Memorize that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go back from, I left all these on, other than the number 1. We're going to go back from this end, plug them all back into that. So you don't have to label them or nothing. It's just 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. That's it. You don't have to label anything. You don't have to get out the masking tape and write numbers. And this is all. This is 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then you just hook them up to the, see? It's not that hard. Anyway, so I'll get that done. I'll get the valve covers back on. We'll get this rad hose on, alternator bracket, whatever else needs to be stuck on here, and then we'll fire it up. And I'm sure it'll start just like that. It'll run poorly because it'll be out of time. We'll come under here and go ear until it's like ballpark enough that it runs good, so I can pull it out of the garage and park it for the winter. And in the spring, I'll start it up. We'll pull it in here, and this engine will go right out. And then 350 will go in. That's the plan anyway. Alright, I think it's about time we fire this thing up. Just have to put the battery bolts in. Oh. By the way, these side post GM terminals, okay, strip the insulation off, take that little stupid 8mm bolt out of there, get some of these. The key here is you got to have a nut on the bolt. You tighten the bolt in until it bottoms out in the post, and then you tighten the nut down against the side post, against the terminal, so it's like that. See what I'm saying? All right. Plug that back in. Hit the key and we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll start. Okay. Is their timing just way off? Let's try there. Okay. What is happening? It's about as much as I can give it. It's running, but it ain't happy. So I went back and checked all my spark plug wires, and I think what I did was I mixed up two wires here. I mixed up 1 and 2.
So you don't have to label them or nothing.
Not sure how that happened. Anyway, let's give it a go now and see what happens. That's better. Instantly fired up. That's all that was wrong. Oh, way better. What the hell was all that? That's better. That's how it used to run. Okay. There. So I just had 2 spark plug wires mixed up.
You don't have to label them or nothing.
No biggie. Of course, I let it backfire through the intake about 17,000 times before I actually tried to fix anything, so that's good. Okay. Let's get some coolant in this. Easy. Here we go. Oh, did I shut the drain? Better check that first. Yep. Okay. Continuing. Seems like an awful lot of work to go to for an engine that's going to get pulled in a few months anyway, but oh well, that's how you find this stuff out. You figure it out as you go. I didn't know this engine was bad. I thought it might have just been really, when I started, I thought it was just one of the rocker arms backed off. But, of course, it wasn't. It was the cam and lifter. And my logic here is that I know I could just stick a cam and lifter in this and make sure that metal didn't go all through the engine. It probably did. Change the bearings and stuff. I'm not putting that kind of money into a 305. They're good engines, but if I'm going to put the money into building something and putting it back together, I'm going to do it with a 350. That's just common sense. And like I said, I've been waiting for an opportunity to pull this out, put a better engine in it. And this just kept running and it was reliable. I pulled this engine with a couple friends out of an old Caprice. Actually, they pulled it for me and we put it in his shop. So thanks to him for that. And this engine did well for, I think this has been in here for like 6 years. And I haven't done anything to it other than change the oil. So it did pretty good. And I mean, this sat for probably decades before that. So, you know, farewell. You've done what you needed to do, but, you know, we'll have a moment of silence for the little 305 here. Okay, that's long enough. Let's get back to making things run again. I'm spilling more than I'm getting in the radiator. Just throwing money on the ground. You never know when you get into this stuff either. I pulled the truck in the shop because it needed a U-joint. And I started changing the U-joint. And I had just started it to pull it out of the shop and go test drive it. And I thought, you know what? I should see what that ticking is. I thought it was just an exhaust leak at first, and it wasn't. And then I thought maybe it's just a rocker arm not backed off. And you know how that went. So I haven't even got a chance to test out whether the U-joint solved my shaking issue on the drive shaft. I mean, it definitely will because the old one was completely beat out. But it just goes to show you don't know what you're going to get into when you start doing this stuff. I thought it was a simple exhaust leak at first. And now we're going to be swapping engines and building a 350 over the winter. That's just how it goes sometimes. You don't win them all. It's how it is. It's fine. We'll deal with it. But not right now. I just want to get this out of here. Ah! I was thinking about doing an oil change with all the coolant that went into this thing, but we're just pulling it anyway. I don't think there's any point. I'm only going to be running it for 5 minutes out in the yard, so we'll save the $40 and just not change it and put it into that 350 instead. I'm going to miss this little 305. It runs so good. Just starts right up so easy. Does that in the winter too. Just touch the key. Doesn't matter what temperature it is, it's running. Well, I got the old C10 parked up for the winter. I got some parts gathered up for this engine build, so we're going to tear into that here pretty soon. So yeah, I do have a plan for this engine. and I'm doing kind of something that's a little different that most people probably wouldn't do, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'll explain a little bit here, but basically what we have here is an early 90s TBI engine, and what I want to do is make it as inconspicuous as possible so that when you open the hood you wouldn't expect that there's anything going on. So I'm not going to make it fancy. There won't be any chrome, there won't be any dress-up kits. I'm going to paint it black. I'm going to put the same old crappy valve covers back on it. It's going to have this aluminum intake that'll be painted, and it's a factory GM aluminum intake, so it's going to look the same as a cast iron manifold. I'm going to put the quadrajet back on it, and I've got a set of 305 high output heads, or 416 heads, that I may or may not put bigger valves in. And we're going to go with a XE268 comp cam. The only thing I haven't decided yet is whether I'm going to use roller lifters or flat tap it, but probably flat tap it because I'm cheap. So it'll be hydraulic flat tap it lifters, I imagine. So that's kind of the plan going forward. We're going to do it on a budget. I should be able to do this for less than $1,000. And we'll have, you know, it won't be a perfect engine. It'll be an old put together 350, but it'll be something that is quite a bit torquier than stock, and you won't really see it coming. Like I said, when you open the hood, you won't know that. It'll just look like an old 350 that's been in there for, well, since the 80s. So with that, I think this is a good place to end the video. And stay tuned, because if you want to see this budget kind of sleeperish 350 build, then you'll have to stick around and subscribe, and you'll see it when it happens.